Hello, listeners. This is Caleb Keith, director of the 1517 Podcast Network, with a special message for you. As the year comes to a close, we at the 1517 Podcast Network want to thank you for being a part of our mission to declare and defend the gospel of Jesus Christ. For years, we've worked to share the life-changing message of the forgiveness of sins for you through podcasts, articles, books, and events. But we can't do it without you. This year, we're aiming to raise $300,000 for our end-of-year campaign to sustain our mission and continue creating content that proclaims the good news of Jesus Christ to the world. Your generosity directly supports everything we do, from producing podcasts like the one you're listening to right now, or to reaching people at home through articles, videos, and even conferences who are in need of the hope and comfort found only in the gospel of Christ. Would you consider giving a gift today? Every donation, big or small, helps us share Christ's work. And again, our end-of-year need is $300,000. Please visit 1517.org/donate to make your year-end gift now. Thank you for partnering with us to keep this message alive and thriving for generations to come. God's peace be with you.
Welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 Podcast Network podcast. You can go to 1517.org/podcast and check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. And while you're over there, make sure you check out everything else that 1517 is doing. You know, we're doing a lot of things. We got all those podcasts, all those articles, academies. You got to sign up for an academy or 2 academies or 3 academies. Sign them up. They're free. How is it all free? Well, it's free because people support it. People like you. Coming in, chipping in, everyone doing a little bit, some people doing a lot. You can be someone that does a little bit or a lot. We'll have either, and you can keep us going. So just go over there to the 1517 website. You can hit the donate link. You can become a contributor. Thank you so much to those of you who already do that. Chad, we are in Isaiah chapter 2. We got through the first 5 verses of Isaiah. And, you know, the first chapter, Isaiah comes out hot and heavy with the law. Man, and tells people, hey, I don't know if you realize this or not, but the Lord is not pleased. He is not pleased at all. In fact, he's not only not pleased, he's not neutral either. He is displeased, and he's had enough. He doesn't like what's going on. And then we got this big shot of hope at the end of the last episode. He's like, hey, don't worry. Like, it's going to sting a little bit. Like, this Band-Aid coming off is going to take a lot of skin with it. But it's all for your good, and the Lord's going to fulfill His promises, and it's going to be great. And you kind of think, man, this could be a short book. Got the law, got the gospel. That's the end of the sermon, right? And turns out, no, we got a lot more sermon to go.
Yeah, in fact, we're going to hear quite the sermon coming up, beginning with chapter 2, verse 6. We're going to go back to the law. we got the law, gospel, law punch going on here.
Isaiah is like this. He's going to go back to the gospel. I mean, he's just going to go back and forth. You're going to get weary of me saying this probably, but like this dude's doing law, gospel, law, gospel, law, gospel, law, gospel, law, gospel, like for all through 50-something chapters of this thing.
Yeah, it's one of the things that if people aren't, if they're not as familiar with the prophets as they are with all the stuff we've covered before this, it's a little jarring because, you're going along and, man, you think this is some sweet stuff. And then you turn a corner and the prophet punches you in the face. It's like, whoa, where'd that come from?
Well, if you don't have a law, gospel hermeneutic, like if you don't understand that God speaks 2 words and it's kind of mostly all He speaks, it's one of these 2 things, right? You might read a book like Isaiah and be like, okay, which is it, man? Like, are we about to get wrecked and judged, or are you about to deliver us and fulfill all your promises? Like, which is it?
Yeah, and there's not a lot of nice, easy segues between these 2. No. I mean, it's some pretty jarring transitions. I mean, sometimes there are transitions, segues, but a lot of times, you just go right from 100% fiery, stern law to 100% sweet gospel. And it's not always easy to tell when one is going to start and when one is going to end. And keep in mind, too, that so it's not like when you're reading through Isaiah. We'll just take Isaiah, for instance. It's not as if you're reading something where you kind of have a list of his sermons collected chronologically. It's not set up that way at all. What you have here is more of a kind of a thematic ordering. So you're going to start out, I think I mentioned this in our first episode on Isaiah, but I'll say it again here. You start out with these 5 chapters, which are a collection of his sermons or oracles or whatever you want to call them, that are going to highlight various themes. We're going to go law, gospel. It's kind of a digest of the whole rest of the book. Then you're going to have his call in chapter 6, and then you're going to go from there to all different kinds of sections. You got oracles against the nations. You have the book of Emmanuel. You've got what's sometimes called the little apocalypse. And then you got the book of comfort. So there's different groupings, but it's not as if it's ordered chronologically or, the first half's law, second half is gospel. And most of the prophetic books are like that, where they're structured not in a way that we are just immediately familiar with. You kind of have to live in those books for a while before you get a feel for the way that they're set up. But anyway, all that to say, he's about to jump right back into some strong law. And this is the kind of law where one of the things we're going to hear in this section is this constant drumbeat of God lowering those who have exalted themselves. So we've seen this plenty of other places. We've certainly seen it happen in narratives throughout the scriptures. But we saw this, for instance, in Hannah's song in 1 Samuel, beginning of 1 Samuel, where she talks about God putting down the high and then lifting the low. Here, the main emphasis is going to be upon God putting down those who have exalted themselves. So we're going to see many references to the Lord bringing people low and humbling people and bringing them all the way down to where they're like hiding out in caves and holes in the ground. So the main theme, I would say, of the section we're just about to come to is that because the Israelites have forsaken the Lord and embraced idolatry from the east and from the west, therefore God is going to bring them down from this lofty, prideful, arrogant position in which they placed themselves.
I mean, there's few things as pervasive throughout Scripture in its totality as the idea that God is going to bring low the exalted and exalt the lowly. I mean, you can. This goes straight through the ministry of Jesus, right? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that Jesus talks about and does. Yeah.
Yeah, you could probably make a pretty good argument that that's probably one of the top main 3 themes of the Scriptures of God, debasing the arrogant, the haughty, the proud, and then raising up those who are brought low. I mean, it's basically the theme of him crucifying our flesh and then raising us into the image of Christ, if you want to put it in explicitly Christian terms. But we see it expressed in the Psalms. We see it in the life of David. We see it here in Isaiah as well. So let's get rolling here with the. I'm going to read the first 3 of these verses, 6 through 8, Isaiah 2, 6 through 8. He says, "For you have rejected your people, the house of Jacob." We might ask, why? Because they are full of things from the east and of fortune tellers, like the Philistines, and they strike hands with the children of foreigners. Their land, now listen to this kind of repetition coming up. Their land is filled with silver and gold, and there is no end to their treasures. Their land is filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. Their land is filled with idols. They bow down to the work of their hands, to what their own fingers have made. So right away, we hear what the problem is. You got influences. So we start out with God rejecting his people. Well, why is that? Well, because they basically rejected him. How have they rejected him? We have the list of examples here. They're full of things from the east, which is, got a lot of things to the east of Israel. You've got, in Isaiah's day, you got the Babylonians, you got the Assyrians, or in his day, the Assyrians, you'll have the Babylonians later, you have the Persians still later. So everything around the Tigris and Euphrates, that birthplace and graveyard of empires. That's all to the east of Israel. So they're full of things from the east, these eastern influences. And then also he mentions that from the west, the Philistines, because they're, of course, along the coast of the Mediterranean. So you got fortune tellers, you got diviners like the Philistines. So kind of the influences are coming from both directions, east and west. And then to finish off this triad, he says that ESV has strike hands. It's debated, if you look in the scholarship, debated as to exactly what this means. So striking hands is certainly one way to translate this. Another is that it can mean like full of, or sufficient, or that which suffices with the children of foreigners. So the idea is basically the same. Foreigners are influencing them, whether they're shaking hands with them in the sense of agreeing with them, or whether they're taking in and being suffused with ideas from foreigners. However you want to take this, the impact is still the same. Israel, as we saw when we were reading through, especially 1st and 2nd Kings, when Israel was Canaanized, becoming more and more like the peoples who were cast out before them. So now Israel continues to be influenced by foreigners, except in this case, rather than the Canaanites, it's the Philistines and then the people from the east, which are influencing them. And the influence, as it's described here, is, there's three different things that are focused upon. So we got land that's full of silver and gold. So there you have wealth, right? There's no end to their treasuries. And then horses are mentioned. The land's filled with horses. And this isn't just, people who are equine lovers. This is not about people who just love to have horses around for riding and for roping. A lot of ranchers. Yeah, there's so many ranchers in Israel. No, of course, horses basically would be the equivalent of security. You use horses because, they're used for warfare.
Horses and chariots, it's like saying that the land was filled with, tanks and
all kinds of artillery.
And artillery. Yeah, it's a whole different thing. You don't want to mess with a country with lots of horses. What's weird about this too, what is informative about this, is at first you might, hey man, if you get the wrong theology going on, maybe like, wait, what's the land like? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's filled with silver and gold, and there's no end to their treasure, and the land is filled with horses. There's no end to their chariots. You're like, man, God must really be blessing them. And let me tell you that,
like how rich they are and powerful.
Yeah, one of these things does not mean the other. This is not. Right. This is not how this works. So, no. That's why, the thing about idolatry, because that's what he's getting into, is like, hey, it's full of idols. This is what it's full of as well. Doesn't always result in this sort of obvious decline of life, in the sense that you might look around and be a rank idolater, and if you worship money, you might get a lot of it. And if you worship power, you might get a lot of it. And so it doesn't automatically mean that all these bad things sort of horizontally are going on. But what it does mean is that God is feeling abandoned, and he is displeased with it.
Yeah, I was reading Jeremiah recently. Toward the end, when the people basically forced Jeremiah to go with them into exile into Egypt, and the people when they get down there, the Israelites start worshiping the Queen of Heaven. And Jeremiah's, telling them, hey, what the heck are you doing? And they're like, well, things were a lot better for us when we worshiped the Queen of Heaven. So it's this idea, does idolatry pay off? Well, in the short term, a lot of times it does. You get a lot of the stuff that you want from these idols. And that's how this triad finishes off. So the land's full of silver and gold, it's full of horses, and it's filled with idols. They bow down to the work of their hands, what their own fingers have made. Now this is kind of a cool Hebrew word here, the one that's translated idols. So there's a lot of different Hebrew words for false gods. And you probably heard us talk before about some of these are pretty funny, like Ezekiel, who's a prophetic potty mouth. His favorite word for idols is Gilulim, which means basically turd gods or crap gods. Probably something a little bit more stronger language than that, which I'm sure you can figure out. But so here's here, the word for idols is Elohim. Now, most people know that Elohim is a word for God. So there's a word play. So these are not Elohim, these are Elohim. And it's kind of the idea. I was trying to think of something that we could say in English that would kind of capture this. This is far from perfect, but it'd be like your gods are frauds. You got this same kind of rhyme going on, but the fraud part's pointing to the fact that, well, they're just, they're nothing, more or less. But you can't communicate that in English. So actually, Psalm 96:5 has this perfectly. It says, the gods of the people are nothing, but in Hebrew it is the Elohim of the peoples are Elohim. So their gods are frauds. That's the idea. So the Israelites, well, the good Israelites, the ones who actually believed in and worshiped Yahweh, they loved to poke fun at false gods, and they come up with these creative, pejorative names for them. So here they're the Elohim, the nothing gods, we might call them. So that's what's going on in Israel. Things are not got all kinds of foreign influence, theological influence. You got people worshiping idols, and folks are getting rich off of this, powerful off of this. So, what happens when people get rich and powerful? Usually, you get a big head, right?
Yeah.
You get haughty, you get arrogant, you get prideful because of what you think you've done or whatever it might be. So that's when we're going to transition to what God is going to do here in verse 9. So man is humbled, and each one is brought low. Do not forgive them. Enter into the rock and hide in the dust from before the terror of the Lord and from the splendor of his majesty. The haughty looks of man shall be brought low, and the lofty pride of men shall be humbled, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day.
Do you believe that this line here, do not forgive them, is, so this is sort of God speaking to Isaiah through Isaiah, right? So he's telling Isaiah this, that so man is humbled and each one is brought low. Now Isaiah is the capital P prophet of this time. This is the guy. This is the mouthpiece of God. This is the guy who speaks the word of the Lord. And so if anything about sort of a doctrine of the keys or this idea of absolution, is that that God could forgive you through the mouth of a person, right? So that you would forgive one another, and that there's some people that have been charged to do this sort of publicly, and this would be pastors, and they're charged to tell you that your sins are forgiven. But there's a reverse side of that too. You could withhold forgiveness as well to the unrepentant, right? Does this seem like here is God saying, okay, so this is what's going on, and for this reason, they're going to be humbled and they're going to be brought low. And I'm telling you right now, do not forget, do not speak a word of absolution to them. Yeah,
I definitely think that's what's going on here. What you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. What you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. So it's this idea. You see it expressed in different places. I can't remember if this is Ezekiel or if it's Jeremiah, where God tells him, I think it's Jeremiah, don't pray for this people. Which is kind of strikes you at first. It's kind of strange. Well, I mean, really? You shouldn't even pray for them? And God's like, nope, I'm not going to hear your prayer, so don't pray for them. Don't forgive them. And keep in mind that the goal of this, it's not as if God wants these people to go to hell. That's not or doesn't want them to be forgiven, but the goal is to bring them to the point of being humbled and brought low, and the Lord alone being exalted, in order that they might be brought finally to repentance and confession, and therefore be ready for forgiveness. So, yeah. There's
almost like it's going to get bad, and you're going to feel a little bit bad, because it's always bad. But it's not. The time has not yet come for you to speak this word of forgiveness. It's you might want to. You might be like, oh man, this is rough to watch. But you're going to have to keep watching.
Yeah. I don't. Maybe something like that was going on. If we want to go way back to Genesis, you think about how Joseph treated his brothers. At least one explanation of that is the reason he kind of toyed with them, at least that's how it kind of comes across, is he was finally he wanted to bring them to the point of repentance and confession. So that's at least, whether that's actually what's going on or not, that's a narrative that's often used for that. And when they were finally ready, then he revealed himself to them. So maybe something like that's going on here. A fun thing in the Hebrew, so the word here translated as forgive is nasa, which means to lift up in the sense of like you're removing something, taking it away. And so it's kind of it's a nice wordplay here because man is humbled and brought low, and Isaiah is saying, don't lift him up. don't forgive him. So it's kind of a double entendre there. And then we have a couple lines, 10 and 11 are going to be repeated, except they're reversed in a little bit later down in verses 17 and 19. This whole section fits together. So kind of keep listening to this language because you're going to hear it again in just a minute. But he's saying, go to the rock, hide in the dust, because God's going to show up, and it's going to be terrible. It's going to be the splendor of his majesty, and his purpose is to bring down the haughty and the lofty pride in order that God alone is going to be exalted in that day. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Luther. I just came across it this morning in his Isaiah commentary, but I'm familiar with it from his work on the Magnificat, where he basically says, since the Lord is most high, he can only look down, and the farther we are beneath him, the better he sees us.
Oh,
yeah. I always love that because it's not what you'd expect. Of course, the closer someone is, the better we can see them, but it's not the way it works with God. So the farther we are beneath him, and the idea, of course, is that he has brought us low. He's humbled us. So the farther we are beneath him, the better he sees us.
Hey, I know something about this. After I hit 40, I got to do a little bit of it's a little too close for me to see it. Maybe that's how God is with us sinners. He's like, oh, you're a little too close to my face right there. Let me back you up a little bit. I see you better.
All right. Yeah, I think a lot of folks in their 40s can appreciate that analogy. I, on the other hand, have been dealing with that since I was about 20 years old.
Yeah. That's a new thing for me.
Okay, so we got he struck the main theme, of course, already, but he's not done yet. Like any good preacher, he's going to elaborate on this. And he's going to do this by repeating this phrase over and over, against all, against all, against all. In fact, in the next 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 verses, you're going to hear it 8 times. So I'll just read. I want to read 13 through 19. For the Lord of hosts has a day against all, again, here's the first of them, against all that is proud and lofty, against all that is lifted up, and it shall be brought low, against all the cedars of Lebanon, lofty and lifted up, and against all the oaks of Bashan, against all the lofty mountains, and against all the uplifted hills, against every high tower, and against every fortified wall, against all the ships of Tarshish, against all the beautiful craft. And the haughtiness of man shall be humbled, and the lofty pride of men shall be brought low, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. And the idols shall utterly pass away, and people shall enter the caves of the rocks and the holes of the ground before the terror of the Lord, and from the splendor of his majesty, when he rises to terrify the earth. So you heard those same kind of lines that we saw earlier in this same section. So Isaiah, this eightfold against all that he has here, he just basically hammering home the fact that everything you could think of that either is proud or lofty, or that represents that which is proud and haughty and lofty, is going to be brought low. So he starts out by making it explicit, right? Against all that's proud and lofty, against all that's lifted up. And then he begins to use various images that are associated with that which is high or mighty or powerful. He mentions here's our cedars of Lebanon, Dan. We heard a lot about those in Song of Songs.
They're way too proud.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a cedar.
People way too proud of them.
one of these days I'm going to bring home a cedar from Lebanon and plant it in my backyard just so I can. They're all over the Bible, right? Gotta have one of these. Now, what might not be as familiar to us is against all the oaks of Bashan. So Bashan's not as pervasive an image in Lebanon as Lebanon is, but we do see it quite a few places. We first meet, maybe not the first time, but the most familiar first meeting is Og of Bashan, who's one of the powerful leaders that's conquered by Moses and the Israelites before they entered into the Promised Land. So Bashan is, if you kind of picture a map of Israel and you can picture the Sea of Galilee, so to the east of the Sea of Galilee and a little ways north, that's the area of Bashan, so modern-day Syria. It's associated in the Bible with just like abundant fertility. It's like, I was trying to think of a modern-day analogy. I don't know what it would be, but, whatever place you associate with being like, rich in grass and all the cattle are fat and happy, that's Bashan. In other parts of the Bible, you'll hear about the rams of Bashan, the bulls of Bashan, the fat beast of Bashan, the cows of Bashan, and then, of course, the oaks of Bashan here. So it's the idea, it's this place is rich and fertile, and so it becomes also kind of a symbol of that which is proud, that which is arrogant. And then he goes on from the tree images, tree metaphors, to mountains and hills and towers and walls. We have mention of the ships of Tarshish. Tarshish is either a place, it's like a coastal town in the Mediterranean, which they don't know for sure which one it is, or it could be a kind of ship, because it's always associated with maritime endeavors. So either way, the metaphor here is that which is powerful, that which is rich, again, emblematic of haughtiness. So all of that is going to be brought low, and the Lord alone is going to be exalted. And the result will be that people go into caves and holes in the ground, because it's like they're so frightened because of their sin that it drives them downward all the way into caves and holes in the ground.
Yeah, this is how the Bible always speaks about the judgment of God. Like it's so thorough. God doesn't sort of dish out some partial judgment. Give you a little bit of like a halfway discipline or something like that. That's why you got to be very careful about asking for the Lord to, judge this thing or that thing, because when God decides to judge, He just judges it all. And you're probably part of that. And you have this sort of just like all-encompassing language, right? Like it's not against like most or a good portion of or the worst of. It's just against all of these things. And you're like, hey man, what did the Cedars of Lebanon do? Like, they don't. What did that? I mean, what's so bad about them? The idea here is just like whatever it is that you think is great is all going to like be. All of it, when the judgment comes, on that day of the Lord, it's all going to be reduced to nothing, right? So imagine, of course, you think yourself are great, but also imagine whatever else you think is great. What are the great things around you? Like what is the thing that you most esteem? It's nothing compared to God on that day. And of course, this is what is going to happen. I mean, the earth does have to be recreated. Unfortunately, for the Cedars of Lebanon, they got to go. Because this all has to be recreated. Yeah.
Yep. Cedars of Lebanon, oaks of Bashan, they've all gotta go. Because of course something better is on the way. But it's all gotta be brought low in order that it might be recreated. So that sounds like it might be the end. Actually it's not. We got a little bit farther to go. We got 3 more verses to kind of wrap up this sermon. So 20, 21, and 22, he goes on to complete the sermon by saying, in that day, mankind will cast away their idols of silver and their idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship. Where are they going to cast them? I love this line. To the moles and to the bats. It's like, here, it's just, it always struck me as such a comical image.
Here, mole, take my God.
Here, go. Here, mole, hold this hold this golden idol for me. Bat, will you carry off this silver idol for me? He's going to throw him to the moles and to the bats, to enter the caverns of the rocks and the clefts of the hills. And why are they doing this? Well, here's the lines we've heard more than once. From before the terror of the Lord and from the splendor of his majesty, when he rises to terrify the earth. And then having said all that, he's got this great line at the end. Stop regarding man, in whose nostrils is breath. For of what account is he? What a killer last line. You might expect it to say something like, stop regarding, vain idols, who have noses but cannot smell and eyes but cannot see, something like that. But he doesn't. He says, stop regarding man, in whose nostrils is breath, for of what account is he? Because, you think about it. Ultimately, what are idols? Well, of course, they're man-made, right? These are nothing more than man-made objects which have been esteemed to, in some way, capture or represent or be the container for deity. So ultimately, every idol is nothing more than the self-exaltation of the man who made it.
Yeah. Well, like when somebody thinks a lot of themselves and maybe they're acting in a way that is offensive to you, and you might say, and you've ever probably have said to somebody, who do you think you are? Right? You might say that to somebody. Right. Like, hey, who do you think you are? That's not what God does. God doesn't. When God's dealing with us, He doesn't say, "Who do you think you are?" He says, "What do you think you are?"
Mm.
Right, yeah. which is a different question, and so
it is.
It's not just like what do you think you are, oh man? Like, you're someone that has breath in their nostrils. That's what you are. Like, don't forget what you are, and that is a terrifying thing when and this is it. He has risen to terrify the earth, which is not a way that it's really great to think about God. You don't like that very much. When he rises to do that, what is terrifying about that, though, is that he does do that and reminds you exactly what you are, a creature.
Yeah. It's humbling. It's frightening. It's a reminder of our mortality, everything that we are in ourselves. I'm glad that's the end of this chapter. I'm glad it's not the end of the story, though. Yeah. Talk about despair.
Yeah, you're just like, well, on the last day, God's going to show up, and He's going to say, I don't know what you guys think you are, and that's going to be the end.
Yeah. Grab your idol and throw it to the mole, because it's over for you. The whole point of this chapter, of course, or this sermon anyway, is to drive home the fact that when you go the way of idolatry and you become puffed up and so proud of yourself, well, just wait, because the day is coming. God will not stomach that kind of behavior, and so he's going to come to judge and to destroy. But of course, the goal is always, when he does that, to bring you to the point of confession. To make you into the prodigal son who is so hungry that he wants to eat the pig food, and then finally comes to his senses and goes home, right? That's always the goal, to bring us back to himself. And that's what he was doing with Israel. That's what he continues to do in our lives as well. He's done it in my life for sure.
Oh yeah.
Over.
This is part of the insanity of idolatry is if you're in right worship, you recognize that what you are is a creature created by God, right? This is what you are. So I was created by God. So I obviously am inferior to Him. When you become an idolater, what you do is you think that you are the sort of creature that could create God. It's such a monumental leap from being one who was created by God to someone who could create God. And this is the great offense, right? Where God's like, you can't, like, who are you? What do you do? Like, do you know what you are? You can't create God.
Yeah.
You can throw these gods to moles and bats. Like, you have no power to create a God.
Yeah, that's the great upside down insanity of idolatry. God makes man, the man turns around and says, "Oh, I'm going to make me some gods." Yeah.
You don't possess this ability.
Yeah. That is not in your wheelhouse. God making is not one of the powers that was given to us. Okay, so well, we got a few minutes left. We can jump into chapter 3 here. I wish I could tell you that having ended chapter 2 with a strong statement of law, he's going to give us some more gospel, but he doesn't. He's not ready for that yet. So we got to wait for chapter 4 to get there. So he's going to go on another law preaching campaign here. Let me read the first 5 verses of this. For behold, the Lord God of hosts is taking away from Jerusalem and from Judah support and supply, all support of bread and all support of water. The mighty man and the soldier, the judge and the prophet, the diviner and the elder, the captain of 50 and the man of rank, the counselor and the skillful magician and the expert in charms. So he's going to take all those away, and what's he going to do? Verse 4 goes on, and I will make boys their princes, and infants shall rule over them. There's some dispute as to what that word means. It could be infants, could be something like caprice, but either way, somebody or something that shouldn't be ruling is ruling. And the people will oppress one another, everyone his fellow and everyone his neighbor. The youth will be insolent to the elder, and the despised to the honorable. So, yeah, I mean, whether this is a completely new oracle or a continuation of what he talked about before, it certainly perpetuates the same theme, that because Jerusalem and Judah have abandoned the Lord and have gone the way of idolatry, God is going to start taking things away from them. He's going to, first of all, take away, it's translated here as support and supply. This is basically it's the same noun in Hebrew, but it's the masculine form and then the feminine form. And that's a Hebrew way of expressing basically completeness. So if we put it more prosaically, we would say he's going to take away all of your support, but support and supply, at least is one way of expressing that. What kind of support and what kind of supply? Bread and water, more or less. You know, we think of bread and water as the bare essentials, right?
Yeah.
I'm just living here on bread and water. God says, well, I'm even going to take that away. I can take away your bread, I can take away your water. Not only that, but all these people, like your mighty men and your soldiers, your judges and your prophets, and he lists them all out there. People who have positions of prominence, positions of power, positions of, so kind of a social prestige, all the way going down to like skillful magicians and experts in charms. So we're dealing here not only just kind of with what we would consider to be legitimate offices, but also illegitimate callings or practices or whatever you might call them. All these things that would have been important for the Israelites for good reasons or for bad reasons. God's going to take them all away, and in their place, what are you going to have? Well, you're going to have boys and babies, more or less, if we take that Hebrew word to mean that. You can have boys and babies exalted to be princes and rulers. And, of course, the idea here is everybody who is qualified for that position and should have that position is now gone. And so you're like, hey, there's a 5-year-old. Let's make him king. Hey, look, there's a 6-month-old infant. We'll make him ruler over us. I mean, it's a ludicrous idea, of course, but that's the point here. There's all the people who should be ruling are gone, and so we're just grabbing whoever and putting them in charge. And when this is all going on, you also have then oppression. People oppressing one another, everyone his neighbor, everyone his fellow. Youth are insolent to elder, despised to the honorable. So it's the topsy-turvy social life, economic life, political life of Judah and Jerusalem when God steps in to teach them a lesson, more or less, by messing everything up so that what is up is down and what is down is up.
Yeah, I do like that he says that, okay, like I'm going to take all this stuff away. I'm going to take everything away. And man, it's going to get bad. It's going to be real bad. You're going to have kings and princes that shouldn't have no business being in those spots. I mean, it's going to get so bad that young people aren't even going to respect their elders. Man,
'Cause that only happens in the worst of times, as we all know.
It lets you know, like, that God really doesn't like this. Like, this is really like a bad sign. And I don't know what that says for us today, but it is weird that he ends with that one where he's just like, oh, yeah, it's going to be bad. And let me tell you, we got all these young people being insolent. I don't know if we ever got over that one.
I don't think we ever did. No. We laugh about it just because, it's so like, it's so commonplace, you don't even think about it. Well, of course the youth are insolent, right? And God's like, no, you see, that's how bad it's going to be. So you realize how bad that it is. So, I mean, we're kind of in the middle. We're at the stop because we're out of time. He's got more to say about choosing leaders who shouldn't be leaders and whatever else he's going to do to bring these people to their senses. I hate to end on the law, but that's kind of where Isaiah is going to end today. But be of good cheer. Good news is coming. God is not only a God of the law, but also a good and gracious Father of mercy, and we will get to that very soon.
Hey, I just know this. This is a little sneak preview. Things are going to get bad. They're going to get so bad that you might run up to some guy and be like, "You have a jacket? You're in charge."
Yeah. It's a great line. Isaiah was an awesome preacher.
Hey, is that a jacket I see? You're in charge now.
You're king now.
Hey, everyone, this guy's got a jacket. Well, he's the king.
You get to rule over the heap of ruins. Yeah, that's
pretty good.
Good stuff.
Well, all right, man. Yeah, we'll leave it there. We'll pick up some of that. I mean, that's a great tease. You know, you're getting more really good stuff. I mean, bad news, but said in the best of ways from Isaiah coming up. So don't miss that. I'll see you later on, Chad.
All right. See you then.